Hey guys, Mr. Murphy here, going over another video lesson with you. This one is going to be on the area of basic figures, and the reason we're going over this one is because pretty soon here we're going to start talking about three-dimensional shapes, and of course the surfaces of three-dimensional shapes can be described by two-dimensional shapes. So in other words, we're going to need to know our areas for two-dimensional shapes, and we're going to spend some time this week reviewing that. So I wanted to go over just probably the most basic ones with you. The first of these would be a parallelogram. Cool. And then remember that the area formula for a parallelogram, A stands for area, equals base times height. And in this example, we want to find the missing measurement, which in this case would be the height. So we're given the area equals 42 centimeters squared. The base is 10. The height is unknown. Okay, so in this case, it's very simple. Divide by 10. That says, get rid of the 10 here. Height is by itself. You should get 4.2 centimeters for the height of the parallelogram. Cool. So since we were starting with an easy one, I figured we would also practice working backwards with area. So given the area, find the measure of the height. Okay, no problem there. So parallelograms, area equals base times height. Remember that this formula applies not just to parallelograms, but also to rectangles and squares, and even rhombuses can use this formula. Okay. Alright, number 2 would be a triangle. And hopefully we remember the area formula for a triangle looks like this. Area A equals 1/2 base times height. I could also do it as base times height over 2. But let's go ahead and do it like this for now. Okay, so for our triangle we want to find the area. So the area is going to be equal to 1/2 times base times height. Now, typically with a triangle, the height will be kind of this dotted line at a right angle to the base. So for our case, let's use this 4.6 centimeters as the height. And then the base has to make a right angle with the height. So whatever side the height is making a right angle to, that's the side that we use as our base. So in this case, the base is going to be 11.3, and the height will be 4.6. Okay, cool. So now, I can think of these three numbers, since they're all multiplying, I can multiply them in any order. I personally like to look and see if either of my base and my height are even numbers, and I can easily split those in half. So for example, 4.6. If I take 1/2 times 4.6, that's going to give me 2.3. So the area will become 11.3 times 2.3. And then I just multiply that together, and if you type that in your calculator, you should get exactly 25.99. And this is area, so our units must be in centimeters squared. Okay. Alright, so for triangles, just make sure you remember the formula is 1/2 base times height, and then wherever the height is being measured, whatever side that makes a right angle to, whatever side it's perpendicular with, that is your base. So this was our base, for example number 2, because it made a right angle with the height. Okay, cool. Number 3. This would be an example of a trapezoid. And the area formula for a trapezoid is this. 1/2 base 1 plus base 2 times height. Cool. So let's call this side B1, the 1.4. Let's call this side B2, the 2.6. And then the height will of course be that 1.3. meters in the middle. Okay, so 1/2 is part of the formula. Bring that down. I'm going to plug in the numbers for base 1 and base 2. That's going to be 1.4 plus 2.6. And then the height was equal to 1.3. All right. Cool. So now order of operations says let's do the parentheses first. In this case, I can add the 1.4 plus 2.6. That gives me 4 exactly, times 1.3. Cool. And now this sort of looks like what we did with the triangle measurements. So on the triangle example, see how we kind of multiplied out of order? We did 1/2 times the 4.6. This time I think it'll be better for us to multiply in order. So 1/2 times 4, that's going to be 1/2 of 4, which is just 2, times 1.3. And then the area for that, 2 times 1.3, is just 2.6. And then the measurements were all in meters, so our final answer should be meters squared. Okay, cool. So again, trapezoids, your area formula looks like this. 1/2 base 1 plus base 2 times height. You have to add the bases together first before you start doing any of the other math. But once you do that, not a problem. Okay, so these are 3 pretty basic shapes that you may encounter a number of times when you're dealing with 3-dimensional objects and finding surface area for those. So just kind of keep that in mind. Kites and rhombuses, not quite as common, but you might see them from time to time. Okay. Number 4, we want to find the area and the circumference of the circle. And we're going to round our answers to the nearest tenth. So with circles are the other kind of most basic shape you run across with 3-dimensional objects. So we want to make sure we know those formulas. I'm just going to go over them really quickly here. Now first, when you're doing area and circumference of the circle, you need both the measurement of the diameter and the radius. Here we are given that the diameter equals 20 miles. And then remember that radius is always half of that. So the radius would be 10 miles. That's the first thing. Okay. Now, since the problem asks us to find area first, let's go ahead and do that. So the area formula for a circle will look like this, which hopefully should be familiar to you from our last unit. Should be area equals pi r squared. We know the radius is 10 miles, so we just plug that in. Area equals 10 squared times pi. That's going to be 100 times pi. Cool. And then in my calculator, let's see if we can put that up here. Yeah, there we go. I'm going to do 100 times the pi button. That's going to be this long number. I'm going to round that to the nearest tenth. I see a 1 with a 5 after it, so I'm going to round that 1 to a 2. So our final answer would be 314.2 miles squared. Okay. Cool. So that's your area formula for a circle. When you were doing sector area, if you had like a semicircle, for instance, that was worth 1/2 of the circle, you would just take 1/2 of this number to find that answer. Or even better, you could take 1/2 of the number in front of pi and then multiply it. Either way. Okay, but let's go ahead and continue with what we were doing. So next we need the circumference of the circle. And that formula is pi times diameter. We already have the diameter is 20, so that's 20 pi. Again, in my calculator, I'm going to take 20 times pi button equals 62.83. We can go ahead and round that to just 62.8. And then circumference is the distance around, so that would just be measured in regular old miles. Okay, cool. So these shapes are probably the most basic ones that you'll see when we get to 3-dimensional objects and surface area, which will be our next section of the chapter. Just as a little recap, And just in case you need them, here are all those formulas we just used in one place. Alright guys, hope this video was helpful for you. Have a great day, and look out for assignment number 7. Should be posted later today.